For years, the truth stayed hidden. The victims forgotten. The cases left cold, until science revealed what time could not. This is decades in the dark, where cold cases are brought back to light. In the summer of 1963, Peggy Beck was 16 years old. She was serving as a Girl Scout counselor at a camp near Deckers, Colorado. It was a position of trust, one given to older scouts who were considered responsible and dependable. Peggy was known as exactly that. She was doing what she had done many times before, supervising younger campers, following camp routines, and sleeping in her assigned tent at night. On the evening of August 17th, the camp settled into its usual rhythm. Campers returned to their tents, lanterns were turned off, counselors checked on their groups. Peggy's tent mate, Claudia, was ill and spent the night in the camp infirmary. Because of that, Peggy slept alone. It was not the normal arrangement, but it was visible to anyone paying attention. Sometime during the night or early morning hours of August 18th, someone entered the campgrounds. There were no signs of forced entry, no reports of shouting, no indication that Peggy left her tent willingly. Investigators believe the approach was quiet and deliberate, likely after the camp had fully gone to sleep. Peggy was attacked inside her tent. Investigators determined that she was the victim of a sexual assault and that she was killed by strangulation. Both occurred at the same location. Strangulation was ruled the cause of death. Police have never stated with certainty the exact sequence of events inside the tent. There were no witnesses, no confession, and no trial. Based on forensic understanding in similar cases, investigators believe the strangulation was intentional and used to end the attack. Because of the limits of the evidence, authorities have avoided definitive claims beyond what could be proven. One of the most troubling questions has always been how the attacker knew Peggy was alone. There is no evidence that she knew him. She did not leave the tent to meet anyone. Investigators believe the most likely explanations are observation and opportunity. Someone watching the camp or moving through it and realizing one tent was occupied by a single counselor. The setting also worked against anyone hearing what happened. The attack occurred inside a canvas tent, in a wooded area, during the early morning hours when campers and counselors were asleep. There was no prolonged disturbance outside the tent, and no one nearby reported hearing anything unusual. When Peggy did not appear for breakfast, concerns spread quickly. Claudia returned to the tent and found Peggy. The camp immediately became a crime scene. Investigators collected evidence and interviewed campers and staff. They followed leads. But in 1963, forensic science had limits. There was no way to identify a suspect from biological evidence. No arrest was made. The case slowly went cold. Not because it was forgotten, but because investigators had exhausted every option available to them at the time. Decades passed. Peggy's family waited. The evidence was preserved. Years later, advances in DNA testing allowed investigators to revisit the case. A genetic profile was developed from preserved evidence. When traditional DNA databases produced no matches, investigators turned to forensic genetic genealogy. By comparing the unknown DNA to distant relatives in public ancestry databases, genealogists were able to build family trees and narrow the search. Nearly 60 years after Peggy's murder, the investigation identified a suspect, James Raymond Taylor. He was 23 years old at the time of the crime. Peggy was 16. Police found no evidence that Taylor had a prior criminal record or a documented history of sexual offenses. He was not connected to the camp and was not known to Peggy. Investigators have not labeled him a serial offender or applied psychiatric diagnoses. Whether this was a single act of violence or part of a pattern that was never discovered may never be known. By the time Taylor was identified, he could not be located. An arrest warrant was issued, but he is believed to have died years earlier. There would be no arrest, no trial, no sentence, but there was finally an answer. Peggy Beck's case was no longer unsolved. Her family had certainty. Her story was no longer defined by silence. Evidence collected in 1963, unable to speak for decades, finally did. Peggy was 16 years old. She was trusted. She was asleep in a place meant to be safe. For nearly 60 years, her killer remained unknown. Not because investigators failed, but because the science had not yet caught up. This is Decades in the Dark, where science brings the past to light. Subscribe for more stories where justice never expires.